Forbes just dropped their 2025 list of the most powerful females in sports. And guess who is sitting pretty at number 4?
The sports world can lie, deflect, deny, or pretend all at once, but the reality hits like a freight train with no brakes. Caitlin Clark didn't simply rise, she detonated. And the explosion was so powerful that Aya Wilson has spent every second since choking on the smoke of someone else's success. Caitlin Clark's place at number 4 on the Forbes 2025 list of the most powerful women in sports didn't just mark a milestone, it annihilated the invisible ceiling that WNBA veterans pretended didn't exist. And it exposed exactly why the league's old guard, especially Wilson, has spiraled into a pattern of jealousy that gets uglier every time Clark's name trends. Forbes didn't hand Clark that ranking as a courtesy, nor did they inflate her numbers for hype. They crowned her because she earned it with real financial dominance, historic endorsement deals, unprecedented cultural impact, and the kind of economic power the league had never seen before she arrived. While most rookies walk into the WNBA with a salary that barely competes with an entry-level office job, Clark walked in with a financial empire worth $8.1 million before she even dribbled a ball in her first professional game. And this is where Wilson's resentment began to boil, because the numbers shattered everything she believed about hierarchy, respect, and veteran entitlement. Clark wasn't just earning more, she was redefining the entire structure of women's sports economics. While every rookie in WNBA history scrounged their first season around $60,000 to survive, Clark's name alone generated multi-million-dollar bidding wars. Her salary might have been the league minimum, but her off-court earnings eclipsed every other player in the league combined. And Aya Wilson couldn't scroll her phone without seeing Clark becoming richer, more influential, and more widely recognized than any woman in basketball history. The Nike deal was the earthquake that rattled Wilson's composure to dust. 8 years. $28 million guaranteed. No WNBA player had ever come close. No rookie had ever been offered generational wealth simply for existing as the face of a sport. Clark's Nike deal wasn't an endorsement, it was a coronation. It cemented her as the centerpiece of a marketing strategy usually reserved for global icons like Serena Williams, LeBron James, and Michael Jordan. And Nike didn't hide it, they put her front and center, plastered her across campaigns, and signaled to the world that Caitlin Clark, not any veteran, was the future of women's sports. Meanwhile, Wilson began posting cryptic messages about rookies needing to earn things and respecting the process, pretending her words weren't dripping with envy. But the timing made the motive obvious. When Clark signed the Gatorade deal, a partnership no WNBA athlete had ever secured, Wilson's behavior tilted from irritated to unhinged. Clark became the centerpiece of a brand associated with generational greatness, elevating her above the entire league overnight. Gatorade doesn't throw its weight behind players who merely perform, they partner with cultural engines. And Clark had become one. Aya Wilson, despite years in the league, had never touched that level of corporate validation, and she knew it. Wilson Sporting Goods sealing Clark as their first athlete deal since Michael Jordan only twisted the knife deeper. Clark's face became the new symbol of basketball equipment in stores across America, which meant every parent buying a basketball saw her before they ever saw Wilson. It wasn't just humiliating, it was irreversible, and Aya Wilson felt that sting every time another Clark-branded display went up. Clark's speaking fees exposed another brutal truth. Companies weren't paying Clark for basketball, they were paying her for influence. While Wilson quietly did corporate events for years without fanfare, Clark's appearances commanded checks equal to entire WNBA salaries. And brands weren't hiding why, they were chasing her audience, her impact, her gravitational pull that dragged millions of new viewers to the league. Clark alone increased WNBA game viewership by over 400%. Networks scrambled to acquire Fever broadcast rights, advertisers paid extra to place commercials near Clark games, and arenas across America sold out because of her. The WNBA had never seen a player bring this kind of economic transformation. She didn't just help the league, she rescued it. Ticket sales exploded, merchandise flew off shelves, and local businesses profited whenever Clark came to town. She became a traveling stimulus package. And this was the part Wilson hated the most. Clark wasn't just good, she was valuable in ways no veteran had ever been. Her social media engagement dwarfed everyone. Her cultural presence eclipsed the entire league. And Forbes validated it all by ranking her not just among athletes, but among the most powerful women in all of sports, globally. Number 4. And the highest-ranked athlete of them all. Clark didn't have to spend a decade grinding for recognition. She didn't need veteran approval. She didn't have to beg for respect. She earned it through undeniable economic supremacy. Forbes analyzed real data, endorsement revenue, engagement metrics, company reports, media impact, cultural footprint, economic activity generated, and brand value. Clark dominated every measurable category. That was the moment Wilson fully snapped. She posted cold, emotionless congratulations that looked more like a hostage note than a celebration. No enthusiasm. No pride. No authenticity. Compare it to her warm, lengthy celebrations of other athletes, and the jealousy practically screamed off the screen. Her own signature shoe had been struggling to sell, a stark contrast to Clark's explosive commercial success. Stores couldn't move Wilson's shoe inventory, while Clark's products triggered instant sellouts. Wilson's envy curdled into desperation as she flooded social media with pictures of her old shoe launch events, tagging Nike in hopes of relevance. But nothing reversed the fact that Clark had taken the crown she believed belonged to her. And then came Clark's cross-sport influence, dominating Pro-Am golf events, appearing across multiple sports networks, pulling audiences far beyond basketball. Something Wilson had attempted for years but never achieved. Caitlin Clark didn't just surpass her, she erased the gap entirely. Forbes captured the reality the league had been trying to avoid. Clark drove 26.5% of all WNBA economic activity in 2024 alone. One player. One rookie. One unstoppable force. And Aya Wilson couldn't stand it. Because Clark exposed the one truth Wilson never wanted the world to see: being a veteran doesn't make you powerful. Impact does. And Caitlin Clark's impact is something Wilson cannot imitate, replicate, or compete with. And that is why the jealousy burns so violently. What happened next wasn't just insecurity, it was full-blown implosion. Because the moment Forbes crowned Caitlin Clark as the most powerful athlete in the country, Aya Wilson's mask cracked wide open and exposed the jealousy she had been desperately trying to hide behind fake smiles, passive-aggressive quotes, and hollow congratulations that fooled absolutely no one. Wilson's resentment didn't suddenly appear out of thin air, it had been simmering beneath the surface for months, bubbling hotter each time Clark shattered another financial record, secured another premium endorsement deal, or pulled another massive audience into a sport that Wilson genuinely believed she alone had carried. But the Forbes ranking wasn't just another headline, it was the moment the entire world officially acknowledged what fans and corporations had already realized: Caitlin Clark wasn't just popular, she was powerful. And she now held a level of economic and cultural influence that no WNBA veteran, not even Aya Wilson with all her accolades, had ever come close to. Forbes used actual metrics: revenue generated, brand reach, measurable engagement, corporate valuations, media analysis, endorsement totals, and influence across multiple industries. Clark dominated every category with such force that her rise looked less like success and more like a takeover. And this is where Wilson completely unraveled, because nothing stings more than data proving that someone else has become the face of your sport while you're still trying to convince the world that you deserve the spotlight. The jealousy didn't start with the Forbes ranking, though, that was just the explosion. The fuse had been burning since the Nike deal dropped, because Clark's Nike contract instantly rewired the entire financial structure of women's basketball. Before Clark, veterans like Wilson believed that endorsement hierarchy was fixed, that brand deals came gradually with time, that nobody, especially a rookie, could walk in and eclipse their entire career in one announcement. But Clark's $28 million guaranteed Nike partnership shattered that notion and exposed an uncomfortable truth: the market didn't care about seniority, it cared about value, impact, and cultural magnetism. Clark had all three in excess. Wilson's reaction to that deal wasn't subtle, no matter how much she tried to disguise it with vague Instagram captions about earning your opportunities and respecting the grind. She posted old photos with Nike executives, as if reminding the brand, and herself, that she still mattered. But her posts didn't land the way she hoped. Instead of reclaiming relevance, they highlighted the contrast. Clark was the future, and Wilson was scrambling to keep up. And then came Gatorade. That's when Wilson's jealousy began twisting into frustration that couldn't be ignored. Gatorade represents elite athletic excellence. Their partnerships are exclusive, rare, and symbolic. When Clark became one of their featured athletes, it confirmed that she wasn't just an exciting player, she was a national phenomenon. Wilson had spent years trying to elevate her brand, yet she never reached that echelon. Seeing Clark leapfrog every veteran in the league with one deal only fueled the resentment. Wilson Sporting Goods announcing Clark as their first athlete partnership since Michael Jordan pushed Wilson further into emotional chaos. Clark became the face of multiple sports retailers, transforming every basketball display in America into a Caitlin Clark advertisement. Meanwhile, Wilson's shoe sales stagnated. Stores were overstocked with pairs that didn't move, while anything with Clark's name sold out instantly. This is where Wilson's passive-aggressive meltdown became overt. Suddenly, she began flooding social media with throwback photos from her shoe launch, tagging Nike in nearly every post, trying to prove that she still had brand value. But the desperation was obvious, amplified by the fact that Clark's influence was increasing every single week. Clark's speaking engagement fees became the next crack in Wilson's facade. For years, Wilson had done corporate events quietly, without ever broadcasting them online. But once reports surfaced that Clark was earning more from single speaking appearances than some WNBA players made in an entire season, Wilson couldn't stay silent. She began posting backstage photos, tagging companies, and documenting events that she had never mentioned publicly before. It felt forced because it was forced. Clark's rise had pushed Wilson to react not out of pride, but out of insecurity. What hurt Wilson the most was the undeniable proof of Clark's cultural power. Clark wasn't just playing basketball, she was reshaping the entire entertainment landscape. She brought in new demographics, new viewers, new families, new communities. Cities hosting Fever games experienced surges in ticket sales and local business revenue. TV ratings skyrocketed whenever Clark appeared. Networks battled for broadcast rights. Advertisers paid premiums for ad placement. Clark was a walking economic engine. And that fact alone humiliated Wilson, who had been trying for years to be the face of women's basketball, only to watch Clark achieve more impact in one rookie season than Wilson had in her entire career. When Time magazine named Clark Athlete of the Year and Associated Press crowned her Female Athlete of the Year, Wilson's envy reached a breaking point. Her response was cold and clipped, missing the enthusiasm she normally gave other players. It wasn't oversight, it was jealousy so obvious that fans called it out instantly. And the worst blow of all came directly from the Forbes ranking, which validated Clark not just as a top athlete, but as one of the most powerful women in the entire sports industry. Clark ranked higher than tennis legends, Olympic superstars, and globally recognized athletes who had been building their brands for decades. Clark wasn't supposed to do that. Not as a rookie. Not this fast. Not without the veteran's blessing. But she did, and Forbes backed it with data no one could argue with. That's when Wilson's resentment fully erupted. Her cryptic posts intensified. Her tone changed. Her comments became sharper, colder, more defensive. She began using phrases like real impact and sustained excellence as thinly veiled attacks meant to diminish Clark's influence. She tried to shift the narrative to veteran accomplishments and longevity, ignoring the fact that the market had already spoken. Clark was more profitable, more influential, more culturally relevant, and more commercially powerful than any player in the league. Wilson had spent years believing she was the foundational pillar of women's basketball. And suddenly, Clark walked in and became the entire infrastructure economically, culturally, socially, and corporately. That level of displacement breaks people. And it broke Wilson. The truth is brutal. Wilson's jealousy isn't about basketball. It isn't about stats or championships or merit. It's about relevance. It's about power. It's about watching someone younger, more influential, and more marketable take the position she believed she deserved. And the Forbes list didn't just confirm Clark's dominance, it exposed Wilson's insecurity to the entire world. Clark didn't steal the spotlight. She earned it. Wilson just never thought she'd have to share it, let alone be overshadowed by someone who outperformed her in every category that mattered. And that's what makes the jealousy burn uncontrollably. The brutal reality everyone keeps dodging is that the WNBA can spin whatever narrative it wants, but the numbers, the cameras, the crowd energy, the pressure, and the cultural shift all point to one thing. Caitlin Clark is the gravitational center of the league now, and the resentment that's been simmering around her is no longer subtle, polite, or hidden. It's boiling, loud, and impossible to ignore, especially when you look at the way veteran players, analysts, and certain corners of the league have scrambled to reframe her success as luck, hype, favoritism, or just attention. Instead of admitting the obvious, she single-handedly rebooted the entire business model of the WNBA, dragged the league into mainstream relevance, and forced the spotlight to shine on players who spent years begging for the kind of visibility she delivered overnight. And the funniest part, the part that exposes everything, is how desperate some people are to convince themselves that this shift isn't permanent, that the attention will fade, that she's just the story of the moment. Because admitting the truth would require acknowledging that Caitlin Clark accomplished in a few months what the league couldn't achieve in 2 decades. She changed the conversation, the money flow, the ratings curve, the sponsorship climate, the fan culture, the media cycle, and the way young athletes, especially young girls, dream about basketball in America. But what truly fuels the fire now is how every game she plays, every arena she enters, every camera angle that follows her, exposes the divide between players who see this as an opportunity and players who see it as an existential threat. There are athletes who have embraced her presence, who understand that if one player brings in millions of new fans, the entire league benefits, and then there are the ones who cannot stand that her shadow stretches longer than their entire careers, that her impact dwarfs years of their grinding, that her jersey sales and viewership spikes and endorsement deals rewrite the hierarchy they thought was untouchable. And the resentment radiating from that group? It's undeniable. You can hear it in passive-aggressive interviews, feel it in cold in-game body language, and see it in the way certain players suddenly become warriors of respecting veterans or paying dues only when Caitlin Clark's name gets involved, as if the league wasn't begging for attention long before she arrived, as if they hadn't spent years saying, "We need more eyes on the WNBA," until the wrong person brought those eyes. What's even more explosive is how the media plays into this dynamic, amplifying the drama, magnifying the tension, cutting and clipping moments to feed a narrative that pits the league against the very phenomenon keeping the league alive. And fans see it clearly, the divide between those who are elevating the game and those who are guarding their egos like a fortress cracking under pressure. The Indiana fever, whether they wanted it or not, became the center of the storm, because every storyline, every comparison, every debate eventually circles back to Caitlin Clark's presence. But what people don't acknowledge enough is how much internal pressure builds inside a locker room when one player pulls global attention, record-breaking broadcasts, and corporate money into a team that wasn't built for that kind of spotlight. Players feeling overshadowed, roles shifting, expectations rising, frustration simmering, and all of it magnified because the cameras never turn off when she's on the court. And yet, even with all the tension, all the noise, all the criticism, all the jealousy, Caitlin keeps showing up, keeps taking the hits, keeps absorbing more scrutiny than any rookie in league history, keeps answering questions that should be directed at the league office, not at her. Meanwhile, fans keep investing deeper, arenas keep filling, merchandise keeps selling out, and broadcasts keep shattering records. And that, more than anything, is what eats away at the people who want her to fail. The fact that every setback she faces only strengthens her momentum. Every cheap shot narrative turns into a rallying cry for her fan base. Every attempt to minimize her impact only increases the size of the spotlight. Every heated moment becomes another viral clip that spreads the WNBA further into mainstream sports culture. Whether people love her or hate her, they cannot escape her. The league can't function without her. The momentum doesn't exist without her. And the players who resent her know deep down that the era of small WNBA is over. The league is no longer a quiet niche with a predictable hierarchy and a contained fan base. It's a national conversation now, and that conversation starts and ends with Caitlin Clark. And the pressure that creates, the shifting power structure, the uncomfortable truth that players who once controlled the narrative no longer do, that is what's fueling the friction, the shade, the coded comments, the icy rivalries. Because in sports, the biggest threat isn't someone who's better than you, it's someone who makes you irrelevant. And the league is now split between those trying to rise with the tide and those drowning in the reality that Caitlin Clark is the tide, the wave, the force, the shift, and the moment that changed everything forever. The wildest part in all of this, the part nobody wants to touch because it exposes too many uncomfortable truths, is how the WNBA keeps trying to pretend everything is fine, everything is stable, everything is unified. While behind the scenes the entire foundation of the league is shifting under the weight of one player who didn't just change the conversation, but rewired the league's identity from top to bottom, forcing everyone, players, coaches, executives, analysts, sponsors, even rivals, to confront a reality they were absolutely not prepared for. Caitlin Clark became bigger than the league itself, and every reaction, whether it's support, jealousy, admiration, hostility, protectiveness, or resentment, stems from that overwhelming, undeniable fact. Because the WNBA wasn't structured to handle a megastar who brings NFL-level discourse, NBA-level media attention, and college football energy into arenas that, just a year ago, struggled to pack half their seats. And the tension from that shift is everywhere, growing quietly, leaking through interviews, surfacing in social media subtweets, appearing in the way certain players set screens a little harder or stare a little longer when something doesn't go their way. What people don't realize is that the league's culture was built on camaraderie, on the idea that everyone was fighting the same fight for relevance, for recognition, for survival, and when Caitlin Clark arrived and overshadowed years of collective effort, it shattered that illusion instantly. Suddenly it wasn't our league, it was her league, and that spotlight became both a blessing and a curse. Because while the WNBA is finally growing, finally trending, finally breaking into mainstream sports talk, the players who spent years grinding in the background now feel like supporting characters in a story that doesn't revolve around them anymore. And you can feel the tension, sharp, electric, unavoidable, whenever a broadcast mentions her name for the 20th time in one quarter, or when a camera pans to her even in games where she's not the highest scorer, because the media isn't following stats, they're following storylines. And Caitlin Clark is the storyline whether anyone likes it or not. And that frustration, this deep, unspoken feeling of we were here first, isn't coming from a place of hatred, but from a place of threatened identity. Because nobody wants to be a footnote in their own league. Nobody wants to watch someone else become the face of a sport they've dedicated their lives to. And the most fascinating thing is how fans pick up on it instantly. Every small moment becomes magnified.